Thank you, and good afternoon. Welcome to the Ad Hoc Pool Committee for February 16th, 2021. The meeting's being conducted in accordance with emergency directives from Governor Sisolak, limiting in-person attendance. There will be public comment available via call-in. I will go ahead and call the meeting to order, and we will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we'll begin with our first public comment period. Public comment during this period is limited to items on the agenda. Speakers are restricted to 5 minutes. Anyone wishing to make public comment may call at this time 702-589-9629.
Public comment, please state your name.
Yes, for the record, Fred Volz. Good afternoon, committee members. Comparing January 2020's convoluted pool financing plan to the updated one accompanying the proposed ballot questions in agenda item 5 today shows material changes worth highlighting. In addition to siphoning money from Tract 350 land sales, taking $7 million from the city's capital improvement fund, future draws on capital improvement funds, and a new bond issue requiring interest and principal repayments into the future, today's version also proposes that any excess operating budget revenue over expenses the city might realize for the current fiscal year and 3 more fiscal years in the future go 100% toward this pool project. Even though there are no current property tax increases associated with this latest version of the pool project, it doesn't follow that taxes won't ultimately need to be increased to cover all the drawdowns of existing tax monies for a pool. For those committee members who weren't present at last week's city operating budget meeting, the documents generated by the finance department indicate the city's extra maintenance fund is short over $8 million, and the vehicle and equipment replacement fund is short another $8 million, for a total of over $16 million needed to fund critical projects that keep our city running. Given the many embellishments added to this pool project during the committee's deliberations, the final cost can only continue to escalate once the consultants present their costing work. These realities should give committee members reason to pause and concern themselves about invoking more than just for the children as a reason to spend tens of millions of dollars on a very modestly used public facility, or the nebulous and unproven theory that a municipal swimming pool is somehow central to creating a community in our city. When mom and dad can't afford to buy all the toys in Walmart for their children, taking the equivalent of the rent and food money to buy these toys anyway provides a poor object lesson in setting spending priorities for both children and adults concerned with how their money is managed by others. And I would ask that these comments be added to the record verbatim. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in public comment? The line is now available. The phone number is 702-589-9629. Were there any emails or voicemails submitted for public comment?
No.
Thank you. All right, hearing no others for public comment, we will close the initial public comment period and move to our first item on the agenda for possible action approval of the minutes of the January 19, 2021 meeting. Any questions or comments regarding the minutes? Member McKay? McNay, sorry.
Dr. McNay, and that was one of the...
You're a member here, so.
But on page 3, it has member McVeigh. I really don't want to be associated with the Oklahoma City bomber. So it's an N, not a V. And then another comment, on page 2, I remember I did mention about I didn't know if it was solar. The only thing that I knew about that, they were talking about the Heritage Aquatic Center is 100% renewable energy. And I didn't know, is that solar? I didn't know. The comment I made was just that the report was that it was 100% renewable energy. So just a correction of that.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on the minutes? Member McNay, would you like to make a motion then to accept the minutes with changes that you've mentioned?
Yeah, I would make a motion then to pass the minutes. Podium, please. Sorry. Yes, I would like to make a motion to pass the minutes for last month's meeting.
With changes.
With the changes.
Thank you. I'll second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. And we'll move then to item number 2 for possible for possible action, discussion, and provide recommendations regarding the design features.
Good afternoon, Mayor and committee members. Keegan Luttrell, the Public Works Director, for the record. I'm happy to discuss any design features or elements, if anybody wants to add or remove anything, but I can give you a short verbal update for what SCA Design is working on. They've begun putting rough plans together and started evaluating what a general cost estimate would be, basically working on the overall master plan, and they still feel very confident that they'll have everything completed within the 90 days. So April 4th, they'll have a report and estimate and conceptual plans for us.
Any questions or comments?
I have a question, only because I was sort of interested in the Municipal. And is this company, when they give us the estimate, is that any consideration of theirs as well?
Yeah, they're exploring pretty much all options that we've given to them, plus anything that they can think of. As Dr. McNay stated, I didn't want to say McVeigh. As Dr. McNay stated about the renewable energy, they're looking into that. I shared with him the post that was shared with me, and the Mirtha pools, and just any options. We're trying to think of anything possible that we can do to try to reduce the cost and still get what we want if we choose to go that route.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Member Adams?
Yes, thank you. One of the things I was thinking about, and it's kind of in relation to the question, so I don't want to get too far off on that subject, but, there is kind of, if those were to be approved, there is kind of an overall cap on how much general money can be drawn. Is that something that they're also aware of, is kind of how much money in general might even be made available through that? So they kind of, so they're not, going, for the moon or anything like that. Is that something they're aware of?
Yeah, that's something I talked to Mr. Colin in depth about, he understands the first time we went around this, came in at 27 million plus everything that gets added onto that. So he's looking at the best way to get what we need for the least amount of money. He was very open to that and very understanding of the roadblocks we're up against.
Any other questions or comments? The question I have is, you said April 4th was their target date for completion?
April 4th, they said originally that they could have the design and estimate done for a proposed new pool in 90 days. For the evaluation of the existing pool was 60 days.
Again, you know, and I know you're well aware of this, but we do have timelines as far as being able to get this on the ballot for June, so.
Yeah, the April 4th is a little bit past what I believe the clerk's office can work with. However, I'm hoping that they'll have enough information, say like 90% estimates and everything, that they can get information to us prior to that, so we could get it before the committee and to council. We won't have the official report, like they were saying, until April 4th, but there's always a chance they could be done earlier.
All right. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, we will move then to item number 3 for possible action, update regarding items related to repairing the existing aquatic facility.
Keegan Littrell, Public Works Director, for the record. Yes, not much of an update. What I received from SCA Design this morning, like I said in the last meeting, they did have a site visit on January 11th, just prior to our last meeting. They met down there with the mechanical, the electrical. There's an aquatic design group that's working with them, plus their architectural firm, electrical engineer, and the cost estimator. They had all met down there looking at their areas of expertise. They've received all the existing plans that we have from the city, so they can review everything. So they're working hard at putting all that together. It sounds like they're already working on their report to get it back to us. And that all includes any code violations that there might be or necessary upgrades. So they are shooting for that March 4th, the 60-day timeline.
Thank you. Any questions or comments?
Is that report coming April 4th as well?
March 4th.
March 4th?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions or comments? I just wanted to confirm, you know, there are some things that have already been talked about. The overflow trenches, apparently the covering material on that is deteriorating. Are they looking at all of those types of things, even some that we may have already looked at doing in the interim?
Yep. Yeah, they're looking at everything that we've mentioned to them, plus a lot of the people that are involved are the experts in their field, so they're looking at stuff that we possibly overlooked. Yeah, like the trenches you're talking about, that it's either we need to slip line it with something or pressure wash it, sandblast it out of there and get it recoated, so they're well aware of that.
All right. Any other questions? Okay, thank you. We'll move then to item number 4 for possible action, discussion, and update regarding the June 2021 ballot questions. Madam City Attorney.
Good afternoon, ad hoc committee members, excuse me. Yes, here to present to you the status of the ballot questions regarding funding the aquatic center. So staff has put together essentially a 5-step plan towards saving for an aquatic center. The first step, we received an anonymous donation and that is the initial money for it. The second step, we believe, is to authorize, have the vote to have the city council approve the placement of a ballot question on the June 2021 municipal general election ballot that would authorize a one-time appropriation of $7 million from the Capital Improvement Fund as seed money for the Aquatic Center. And in addition, there would be another ballot question we recommend the city council place on the June general election ballot for redirecting the proceeds of the sale of Track 350 towards funding an aquatic center. Step 4 would be staff would recommend that the city council adopt an ordinance that would essentially pledge excess revenues over and above our expenditures towards the aquatic center. And then step 5 would be to, if there is additional funding needed, then we may ask the city council to place another question on of the ballot for voters to approve the either the monies from the Capital Improvement Fund or possibly a private placement bond, which is debt, and so pursuant to our ordinances would have to be approved by the voters, but it wouldn't. Unlike like a general obligation bond, it's not backed by property taxes, so it wouldn't increase taxes. So that's the 5-step plan. You have 4 pieces of that, or 3 pieces of that before you today in the form of these ballot questions. We would recommend that the Pool Ad Hoc Committee recommend that City Council move forward with just 2 of these questions. And those 2 are the question that would redirect the proceeds from the sale of Track 350 towards funding an aquatic center, and the question asking whether the city may appropriate a one-time appropriation of $7 million from the Capital Improvement Fund for the funding of an aquatic center. And again, the third ballot question would have asked the voters whether the city should annually transfer $1 million from the Capital Improvement Fund to a pool reserve fund on an annual basis for the lesser of 10 years or until the aquatic center is completed. And we would recommend again that we hold off on that until we really understand what, after these revenues are pledged towards the aquatic center, what really is needed, and whether we need a private placement bond in addition to that to complete the funding. And I also, on the dais today, is a new version of the ballot question before you. And this version puts a placeholder in for the cost that is estimated for the aquatic center. So that way, once we have what that number is from the consultant, we can just place that in there. Whether you want to include that is optional. The pro and con committee will be educated on the 5-step plan, what the program will cost, and the pro and con committee will be able to also elaborate on how the aquatic center would be funded and what that cost would be. So it doesn't necessarily have to be in the digest, but it can be in there today as well. In addition, the city, while we are limited, we cannot expend governmental funds to support or oppose a ballot question, but we are allowed to educate the public on a ballot question. So we can, put on our website the cost and things like that. Questions?
Thank you. And of course, all committee members are free to educate the public and promote what they would care to do. Any questions or comments?
I have one, please. I'm not sure that I understood you, but this part that you've highlighted on that can or cannot be?
That's for the committee to recommend, I think, to the city council. In the ballot questions that were included in the packet, this bracketed language wasn't in there. So I merely highlighted it to just show it's different than what was included in the packet.
Okay. So that's just an option, is what you're saying? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Member Adams?
Yeah, also with regards to that, and we're talking about timelines. We're running against the clock right now. With something like this, is the digest, is that all have to be included with when it gets submitted with the question and with the pros and con arguments? I mean, is this all together? So is that little bit right there in the bracketed, have to be ready and be there within that time frame, or is that something that can be added in there as it goes through the process of approval and everything? Essentially, does this placeholder last us through this process so that it can, if we get that number, to have that number placed in there when we receive it?
Well, first I would say that these questions are going to be before the city council at the next meeting in a week, and we do, in order so that we can appoint the committees and meet our deadlines for the county, we would have to have these questions approved. They can be approved with the placeholder for the cost estimate, and as long as we have the cost estimate before those documents are due to the county, which I believe is April 15th, I'm pretty sure, but I'll double check that. I think as long as we had those cost estimates by then, it can all be included.
All right, yeah, because I guess that's kind of the concern there is just trying to make sure we can get in time with everything, because I know this is going to be important to people. On one point, I want to be sure that people understand that we're not asking people for a blank check here with these questions, but at the same time, we want people to, they're going to want to know, when we are asking to set aside funds, they're going to want to know what that cost is going to be. So.
Yeah, and I would just reiterate, the cost doesn't have to be included in the ballot question. So if for whatever reason the estimates aren't ready for the deadline, it can be included in other materials later. The city, again, can post the cost on its website or just educate the public on what the estimated cost is. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the digest. And obviously the cost is going to be different if most likely if we're going to be funding a new aquatic center or repairing the former aquatic center. So, I might actually recommend against including it in the digest just because it's more limiting, and it's really the estimated cost really goes more into the public information than what the question is asking.
Right, because we're not asking them, do you want to build a pool for this much? We're saying, do we want to identify the funds from these sources to set aside for a special fund for the aquatic center?
Yeah, this is to provide that initial funding. And again, if the voters approve this funding and for whatever reason the aquatic center is never built, the money can't be used for anything else. So it would either have to stay in the capital improvement fund or be used for the existing aquatic center. It couldn't just be used for whatever. So there's that to consider as well.
And then with regards to the question, I'm not sure which number they are, obviously, but with regards to keeping the Track 350 one in there, but then moving the one talking about the annual transfer, my only question is, we don't know what that Track 350, if it's kind of an, when it sells, if it sells kind of a thing for how much. And so, that's kind of, to me, I see it's the biggest variable in looking at that. So I guess is that why we want to know if with that before we go forward with this? Because to me, at least, this identifies money, actual money. So I'm just kind of curious why the decision for not wanting to move forward with one over the other kind of a thing, and just kind of where that thought process came from.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, staff and I did a roundtable, and, first of all, having two questions regarding the capital improvement fund is confusing. And what we're concerned about is one question gets approved and the other one doesn't. Voters thinking it's an either or, when we need both. Two, as you pointed out, the sale of Track 350, the amount that we'll bring in is uncertain. And so, when we go to the voters and we're going to ask for additional money for the capital improvement fund, we just think it should be, the initial steps are getting this seed money so that we can start, and then we'll understand what additional revenues we're getting each year for 4 fiscal years, and we can see what that is, and then we can see what the sale of Track 350 is, and so we'll have a better picture on those funding sources, so that when we go back to the voters and say, well, this is what's needed to cover it, so that that's a more clear and complete picture.
Thank you. I have no other questions. I have maybe some comments for a little bit later, but if other people had questions at this time.
I would like to compliment you on the way these are written, because they're very clear, and it does mention it will not increase taxes or fees, which I have thought all along was extremely important for the success of it. But until Mr. Luttrell has some sort of a figure, it seems like we don't have any idea of what we could put in that figure. And you will be getting that information, you said, on the 4th or 5th of March. Would we need to know that maybe as soon as we could, so that if it was a reasonable figure, it might be good to put it in? I mean, but it's such an unknown, it seems.
Well, staff would recommend, again, because of the deadlines, and we have to appoint committees and have those arguments drafted, and things have to be ready well before the April 15th deadline. So we would recommend approval of the ballot question language, either with the placeholder or without the placeholder. And then if there's not a cost estimate ready in time, or if the cost estimate is, whatever the result is, there's still time to no longer go forward with the ballot questions. In other words, we can always hold them for a future election if for whatever reason later on, those figures aren't ready.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I think the number is important for the public. I really do. So Keegan, tell the guy to step it up.
Anyone else?
Thank you. Let's see, I guess, well, in terms of the amounts here, I guess we're not going to know if it's going to be for the repair or the new. I'm trying to think if it'd be going to be a range or, so I'm still kind of confused. And I thought the council, the reason you delayed these was because you did want a number, a cost number before you would approve to have them go on the ballot. Is what I thought in the past that had been tabled because of that, because of the amount, if I'm not clear. And then I guess my one other comment is that I sometimes, when aquatic center, every time I see that, I kind of think of the disaster in terms of, everything people thought. I mean, we want a pool. And I keep thinking, you put aquatic center in there, and people are going to think that the same reason they defeated the other one is that it's going to cost too much, and it's going to be redundant services. We don't need another fitness center, not this and that and the other thing. So, and I don't know if pool and aquatic center are synonymous, but I have a different feeling when I hear aquatic center. When I talk to people, I just talk about a pool, and I'm glad that, like Carol said, that we talk about in here in the questions and the ballot questions and the supporting documentation, I'm sure, about how it's not going to be an increase in their taxes. That was the hard thing for people to accept, was all that money that was going to be on the bond issue and all that. So I'll shut.
Thank you. My recollection of the discussions we've had on this committee is just along those same lines. I believe that in the NRS, it does list certain recreational facilities. So I don't know if that's where this aquatic center, or maybe it's just an insistence that we cannot call a pool. But I suppose we can make a recommendation as a committee. It's going to be, the final decision will be the city council's decision. Madam City Attorney, do you know of any requirement that this facility be called an aquatic center?
I'd have to double check with staff on that. It's kind of been the term that we've been using to see if there was a basis in NRS for that. I will say that I think the word pool alone is a little bit too restrictive. You know, we're talking about full infrastructure here, so we do need to have a term that's encompassing of the additional infrastructure that goes along with the pool. But as far as whether the term aquatic center specifically needs to be used, I'd have to check with staff as to why that might have been the preferred term. That we can certainly explore other terms that we feel fit more along the pool title. So.
Thank you. Again, I don't recall specifically what it was that I saw, but somewhere in the NRS, it does talk about different recreational facilities. And, you know, that term aquatic center is in there, but I believe the term pool was also in there, but I'm not certain. Member Carroll?
Could we call it like the community pool facility or something like that? Would that maybe be?
Yeah, I think
an option?
the committee is free to discuss and form a recommendation on exploring different names.
Okay.
But I will say that I think there is issue as far as Nevada statute that goes for what that wording does have to encompass. Because I believe it was the city of Henderson that found out the hard way, and that their wording on it did not include things like lane lines or a lifeguard stand. And that's why the last ballot question said recreation. So it was kind of a catch-22 because then we had to have the wording such that it would include, you know, a locker room and the different items that would need to be purchased for a locker room. And then people thought that meant that, you know, because we had those other recreational items, it meant that we could buy a playground at a park. So a lot of that came down to the education and just being able to articulate, whether it's in the wording or in the city's education of the community, exactly what could be purchased from the funds that were secured.
Yeah, that's a great point, Julia, and that's what I was saying with the word pool just being a little bit too restrictive. We have to think about all the infrastructure like locker rooms, things like that. So it could be that's aquatic center is really the best term. It sounds like.
I'll add this to the point of the concern with the language last time I believe was for recreational facilities, including an aquatic center, I think was what it said. And I know that was probably chief among the concerns of people because that was in the same language in which we were asking for, you know, a $40 million bond, which could have the potential to raise taxes on, you know, on people. And so I think the two of those things together was what really gave a whole lot of people pause. And, you know, it ended up, I think, being, you know, 30-70, I think, you know, and it being defeated. And so I think that's, you know, we do want to be sure that we're being very specific about what we want without being so narrow that we step on our own toes with what our ability is. I think, you know, something like a community pool center or a community pool facility, I think that's specific. And of course, I think when we go back to the NRS, and that was, there is, I know what the mayor had mentioned or the chairman here, I found that list because when I looked at recreational facilities, that's where they had this list of what is included in that. And so that was, I know, a concern because it could have been any number of things potentially when we talk about that money. And then, you know, the other thing I'll just put out just as a comment in general about, you know, these questions going forward is, you know, the other question was about money. I think it was $5 million from the Capital Improvements Fund specifically for something, and that did much better. That was, then we got to 40-60, you know, and I wonder, you know, how that would have done if we didn't have the other ballot question asking for a bond that could raise taxes, because I think that kind of put a lot of emphasis, but I think it already shows a willingness of people to, you know, look for funds that we already have, identify funds that we already have to maybe go towards this. So I think the community, we're getting there. I think, there's obviously, the whole reason this committee is here is because there's interest amongst the community for addressing the pool, whether it's to repair or get a new facility. So I think it's important that we really look at this and try to get this right so that we can go forward and start the process. So.
How about Boulder City Community Pool and Recreational Center? Or Boulder City Pool and Recreation Center?
Yeah, I think where we're at, because again, obviously Member Adams and I have come across this in the law, and Ms. Callaway has mentioned this as well. What I would suggest is if we do form a motion here, that the recommendation be for staff to research the potential names of facilities, and with our recommendation to council that information be provided to city council. And again, the reason I'm suggesting we do it that way is our timelines are tight here. Council's going to be making the final decision on this at any rate, but for us to be able to recommend that we get a clear definition of why we're using a particular term. Question I have is if approval were to be given to reserve $7 million out of the capital improvement fund, and it's not necessary, somebody decides they've figured out how to repair the pool or magically remake it or whatever, would that hold remain on that money? Or would that be a decision for city council to say at some later point that the project's not moving forward and therefore that money can be used elsewhere? Or would it become obligated because of the vote by the people?
So two parts to that question. I think with respect to the first part, and the capital improvement fund, when the funds are approved for an aquatic center, the way the question is worded is broadly. So we can use those funds for a new aquatic center, or we could use it to repair the existing facility. So once the funds are approved by the voters, the city is able to use it for the existing center. Of course, like with any contracts, any sort of consultants or contractors we get to do that work would have to go before city council. The funding would just be allowed to be used from the capital improvement fund. The second part of that question is, what if we don't want to repair the existing aquatic center, where it becomes cost prohibitive and it would just be throwing money away essentially, or and we don't get enough money or we don't want to build a new aquatic center. Well, then the money cannot be used for any other purpose, and until the voters approve those funds to be used for a different purpose.
And that would apply also to the potential land sale as well, because that's the situation we're in right now with Track 350, is other city funds were used to pay off the debt that was incurred with the construction of Boulder Creek. So it became unnecessary to continue that, and we're simply asking the voters if they want to redirect that money right now. But when it does sell, that 2010 ballot question is still the controlling law on that. Does that sound correct?
If there's no future ballot question redirecting the proceeds, then yes, the 2010 question would be controlling and the money couldn't be used. I believe it also says, and other capital debt. So it could be used for other capital debt, but otherwise it can't be used for anything that the ballot question didn't approve it for. So it would have to go back to the voters, like we're suggesting now, to get approval. Any expenditure has to be approved by the voters.
And likewise, let's say we had somebody that came and said that they could repair the existing facility for $2 million, let's say, and city council says, absolutely, that's the direction we want to go. Thereby, we have a $5 million surplus that has been approved by the voters to be used at the aquatics facility, wouldn't at that point it just be reallocated fund back into the city, into the CIP until voter approved use of that moving forward? If we only used a portion of it, like the 2 million?
Essentially, if the money's approved for the specific purpose, it can be used for that purpose, and it can't be used for any other purpose. So if there's only a portion of that money used, then the rest of it would have to go back into the capital improvement fund, and then couldn't be used until approved for another purpose.
So it would essentially just remain in the capital improvement fund as restricted, and, could not be used for other projects until the voters either remove that restriction or voted to use it for some other project. Any other questions, comments?
So the 7 million could be used for repurposing the pool versus building a new one, is that correct?
The $7 million could be used to rehabilitate the existing center, yes. Yeah.
And, I just want to make a comment about what Councilman Adams said, because the open-ended part of that previous question that was turned down by the voters did just say open-ended for other recreational uses. And I know that was a sticking point because people had no idea. So I personally think that we better stick to aquatic or swimming or pool or something, just because I know that sounded too vague, and it really didn't know if the pool was going to cost the 40 and what the rest would be used for. So I think identifying it as swimming for a community, however it's worded, is a good idea.
Other questions or comments? Okay, well, I think we're also being asked here this afternoon to take a look at whether to make a recommendation to City Council on the annual transfer of $1 million. Essentially just drop that question. Was that your recommendation?
That's correct, Mayor.
So any thoughts on that? Member Adams?
I guess I would think that if it's staff's opinion that that might be something that we want to hold back on, I think it's going to be that much more difficult. If staff's not totally confident that it's reasonable at this time to go there, then thinking that the voters are going to think that it's reasonable to get there, I don't see that happening. Personally, I think that these questions are set up to address the responses that we got from the last questions, what the real concerns were. So I myself am comfortable with the other two that are being recommended. But if staff doesn't have, if staff thinks that it might be in the best interest of moving forward to not have that other question recommended to council, then I would support that.
Anyone else?
Good afternoon. Oh, better there. I guess one concern would be putting the price of the pool in there. I think that'd be great to have it in there, but as we look back before, if we say the pool's going to be 20 million, but we don't build it for 3 or 4 years, adding on that 6% every year, do we need to forecast that so we're not misleading the public? If say just because of interest rates and how everything goes, it could be another few million just from that. So that could be something as kind of as the timelines come together. And I don't know, I'm sure they'll check into it, but I just looked on the phone real quick, and there's a couple places that, like Green Valley Activity and Indoor Pool, and there's a few of them that are actually named that. I don't know if by putting indoor pool, that would consist of all the locker rooms and everything like that, but yeah, that would probably be a good, something to change to clear it up.
And again, I think, as Member Adams also indicated, there's something in the law about that. So I think asking staff to, research that and present that information. Certainly I think people understand a pool, and when you start talking about other facilities, then it starts to confuse things. I guess a question I would have, Mr. Littrell, is when they do their cost estimates, I mean, we understand they're not going to break ground on this, in June of this year. Can they give a projection on, how long it would take to get the final plans and base their cost estimate on that potential start time?
Yeah, I'd want them to give us today's dollars, and then also so we know, okay, it's going to take us 18 months to design, another 6 months to get it awarded, bid it out and awarded. So add 2 years of inflation on that, plus construction management, all those costs that would be involved in that. So yeah, that's something I would definitely look at.
Okay. And again, that's to your point, Mr. Anderson, that I agree with you that, if these things were to be approved and then 3 years later have to go back to the voters and say, gee, you need to give us $4 million more for this, they're not going to be happy about that, I'm sure. Rightfully so. Does that answer what your concern is if that's done?
Yes.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Adams?
Yeah, I guess, just talking about this, looking at this placeholder, and, I want to be sure that we don't confuse too much between what the question is and what it is not, and so I understand the need for it, but once we have the report in or the estimate and we have that information, that really does address in a very in-depth way, I'm certain that we would be able to make it available to the public in a digestible way for them, like we have with a number of our other things where we, talk about, how things are financed or how we're doing things. So, it might be something that we have the ability to still inform them, because I think that's going to be, really key is making sure that the public is informed so that they can give us a response that, based on one of information, one of understanding what they're being asked for. And so that when we get that response, we can know that, whether it passes or it fails, we know that they based those off of accurate information. So, I don't want to be too, get too nitpicky about seeing one specific dollar amount in here and then, and them not going any further than looking at that, not that necessarily would do that. We have very informed voters, but I do think it's going to be important that we get out as much of that information to them, regardless of whether or not it fits into this digest or fits into these questions. I think that's what is going to help make sure that we get, the correct answer from the people, whether it's for it or against it. That'll let us know where they're coming from and maybe a little bit of why too.
Other questions or comments? Well, I would suggest a motion then to recommend that staff research the facility type and provide that information to City Council, as well as to remove the question for the annual $1 million transfer from the Capital Improvement Fund and just remain with the $7 million cost from the Capital Improvement Fund and the proceeds from the sale of Tract 350.
I would second that motion.
Any discussion?
In that, would we still be including this placeholder for the council to discuss at that later time, just so that we could at least have that discussion at council?
Sure.
Member Jeffries?
I think that was my question as well, is this going to be in or not? So, on the same page.
Any other discussion? All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Thank you, Madam City Attorney. We'll move now to item number 5, for possible action, discussion, and direction from the Municipal Pool Ad Hoc Committee regarding informing the community on the progress of the committee to include proposed ballot questions, projected costs for repairs of the facility, projected costs of a new facility, and the financial plan for funding a new facility.
Committee members, at the last ad hoc pool committee meeting, members discussed wanting to start the conversation regarding educating the community regarding everything that the ad hoc pool committee has done in an effort to get the word out on potential ballot questions and general progress of the committee. I just want to reiterate that city staff is allowed to educate. We cannot use taxpayer dollars to advocate, but we can educate, and members of this committee are allowed to advocate. So if you guys want to come up with suggestions or your thoughts on how to move forward with reaching out to the community, be happy to start that conversation.
Okay, suggestions, recommendations?
The last meeting, I know I talked about it for a second, but I just wanted to know if we were able to talk about it, but until we get the number of the price of the actual pool, I think it's kind of hard to talk about too much, I mean. But anyhow, that's all. I just wanted to try to talk to the public a little bit, and then the packet, I think this is easier to understand. So, but down the way, I think it'll be more important in the future.
Member Adams?
I think one of the things that would be important just for informing the citizens about, what this facility is, what is it being used for currently? What are, how many people? I know we've talked about that and it's been presented, but I think, putting that together in ways that people can see how the pool is being used and by who, I think that helps to give people an understanding of the purpose that it fills, and so I think that type of education is more really just the basic ins and outs and information about what really goes into this. Whether or not we want to also include information about how this in general, how this pool ad hoc committee has, how we moved along, a timeline of how these decisions were come to. If that's helpful, I know we have to be careful not to toe the line of, getting into the advocacy area. But I think it's important just so that people can see, the whole reason we have, formed this, I think, was to create a more public and a more open space to let people view this, So simply the fact that we have all of these meetings on YouTube, I'm pretty sure, at least most of them, that gives a lot of people access to the information. So they don't just have to take, a paragraph, thing for it. It's just promoting that. Look and see what the pool ad hoc committee has done. You can see it right there. Maybe not live, but in more or less real time with the discussions and what was had. So I think simply just providing and making sure that information is easily accessible, I think is the best thing that we can do.
Member McNay?
Yeah, I'm hoping that the staff can do as much to educate, and I don't know what vehicles exactly. I don't know if you saw the letter to the editor in the paper by my neighbor, actually, Nancy McFarland, who was responding to Fred, and about how our true community really needs recreational activities. And she was like, I thought she did a great, I don't know if did you guys read that? I have it. And I praised her, and I thought she did great. And this is an 80-plus-year-old woman who's lived here, on and off for decades. And, she just knows that we're a vibrant community which appeals to young, middle-aged, all, and we need to have good schools, a good library, good recreational facilities. And so I'm just in that, so I'd like to, as an advocate, since we're in the committee and we can be advocates, then I guess I need more direction about what, I mean, not everyone gets the paper. I'm trying to think of the best vehicles to get the word out and to counter the people who are anti, any kind of expenditures for, I mean, he doesn't want the library, he doesn't want the pool, he doesn't want any parks or fishing pools, nothing, So we gotta counter that somehow, and I'm not sure the best vehicle for that. So I guess I'm asking for input from Eddie and staff, what we can do.
I would just say that I think, you say we, I think, it's more important that we're talking about, you as an individual or me as an individual or any one of us, because, we aren't necessarily as this committee or as the city, in the place for advocacy, so I just wanted to make that clear. But, I think those are conversations that we can have as individually speaking, but maybe not here as a committee about how do we counteract, because, it's important that everybody's, our role here is to listen to everybody and make sure that, even if it might be against our personal convictions about what we think is best or not, we want to be sure that we're respecting, everybody, and that they're just given access to the information so that they can make the best decision possible. So nothing, I absolutely understand where you're coming from too. And I think, but I just want to be sure that we're having the conversation about, when we're talking about what do we want to do in our individual roles as individuals, and keep that separate from, what do we want to do as a committee to make sure that the public is being informed.
Well, I think this is terrific. It's not wordy, and it's visual, and people learn and grasp what it is. But I have not met anybody that doesn't think we should have the pool. I think one of the things that will push this forward is if it costs a lot of money to rehab that pool, I don't think there's anybody that hasn't had to make a decision about, you can't put any more money into this car, you have to buy a new one. And I think, in fact, that figure is going to be more, I feel, more as convincing as almost anything else, because I do believe people know we need a pool. So that figure to me seems really important, because I don't think it's going to be small. I think it's going to be really big.
Consciously or subconsciously, people always do that cost-benefit analysis of,
Right.
Do we go for a new facility, or do we try and keep the old one going well past its expected lifetime? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Member Carroll?
Can we, and not advocate, but put information maybe in a mailer with the utility bill? I feel like I've gotten stuff before sometimes, just with facts, with once we get some numbers, that type of thing, and also the paper. But I agree that not everybody gets the paper, but quite a few people do. I'm just trying to think, like Valerie was saying, the vehicle we can talk to people too, and you could have something up at the pool like we did, but that's like preaching to the choir pretty much. So, yeah, I'm just concerned about the vehicle.
One thing, this is an action item to give possible direction to city staff. I do think, as has been said, staff can provide educational materials. And I think that's an important factor. You need facts in order to communicate. We've talked about it before. A list perhaps of the programs at the pool. A lot of people don't, they don't go there, so they don't understand what happens there. So I think something like that would be a good idea if we could understand all of the programs that are there. The swimming lessons, the senior classes, all of those things that occur. I think getting that information would be good. We've certainly talked about, how many people use the pool. We know that number has been declining, both due to COVID and also due to the condition of the pool. So I think that's something else that we could have available. If there are any ideas of what might be, if we look at the current pool now, what cannot be done at the current pool that could be done if the design was different, that sort of thing. And again, that you might start bordering a little bit on some advocacy, but I think there are certainly programs that Cherie probably has in mind that she would like to do. And
You know, along those lines, I think if there were something that came out in little bits frequently instead of a whole lot of information all at once, so maybe they were kind of bombarded with pool info, but did you know, and maybe the 80-year-old lady could put something in, or somebody, just maybe some testimonies to what people, but keep coming instead of a whole bunch of stuff all at once.
yeah, and I think we can also explain what we are doing right now in the process, that we are looking for alternatives to what was done previously. And again, that's not advocacy, it's simply stating what we are engaged in.
I think the comment of the mailer, I think the comment of the mailer is a good idea, because I hear when people get something in the mailer, you know, people see that because it's you know, that's something that stands out. So I think that's a really good way to get information into the hands, and whether it's its own thing one time or it's a little bit of something each time, you know, I think that's something. But I definitely think utilizing that and promoting the videos of us and the work we're doing here is just so that they can review the open process. I think that helps too. So I think those are two avenues that are certainly valuable to this committee that we can use.
And with the way the mailer works, I think that could also be direction to city staff at this time. Determine if it's available for the May bills. I don't know that we would have the information that's needed prior to that, but that would hopefully get to folks before the June election. Hold on just one moment. Madam City Attorney probably has something to correct me on here.
I would just, you know, say that any mailers regarding the pool would just have to be specific to, you know, the existing pool and things that the city's offering, and, you know, very separate from the ballot question. You know, education and informative as to what maybe the pool brings to the community. But yeah, a public officer or employee shall not request or cause a governmental entity to incur an expense or make an expenditure to support or oppose. So, you know, it's very important that that line be clear.
So we'll want to make sure we run it by the city attorney before it goes in the mailer.
I guess I was wondering, what city council meeting, is it the upcoming one, the 23rd, that you're going to be talking about these ballot issues?
Well,
Like
it's been
city
held
council?
in abeyance until that meeting, yes.
Because I'm just thinking, in our meetings starting to be open now for city council, now that some of the things are opening up. I mean, if we could get people on the screen to come to that, the city council meeting that you are, and we can advocate, you know, if we could respond to those items on the agenda, is that, and is it going to be next week?
Yes, we have and again, they're coming back. We don't have to make a decision. We've held it in abeyance twice for the questions.
But it'll be on the agenda and people can talk to it?
I believe so.
So maybe that would be for, we need to be there. How many people are they going to let in?
15 right now.
15.
By reservation, yes.
Member Jeffries had said, and Mrs. Carroll, about the mailers. Why don't we put a mailer out for water aerobics class, you know, for seniors, kind of things like that, little tidbits, you know.
Programs available.
Yeah, just because some of the people around the community might forget that that's available, and those are fun classes, and it's good for everybody. Get out, it says post-COVID, well, semi-post. But I think that's a great thing for the city.
Any other thoughts? Member Reel?
I just wanted to say that, you know, for the committee that puts the arguments for passage of this thing, I don't know how many paragraphs you can have, you know, on the ballot, but hopefully they can do it convincingly that we need the pool.
And hopefully there would be volunteers from this committee to do that. Other questions or comments? So do we need a formal motion of what we've discussed then? We want information regarding programs at the pool, number of participants, whether the mailer is available, anything else?
I'm just reminding people that if they want to review these meetings, that they can.
Yeah, right now, this is for direction to staff. So what are we looking to ask staff to assist with?
Yeah, this paper, like she was saying, Ms. Jeffries, this is a good paper, so if we can keep this one or fine tune it, something like this is good for the future. Doesn't have to send it out right now, but in the future.
And again, in my opinion, that's strictly educational there. It's not promoting anything. Other ideas that we would like to have staff follow up on? All right, all those in favor then of doing those items?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Brings us to item number 6 for possible action, discussion and recommendations regarding future agenda items. Any questions or comments regarding future agenda items? Member Jeffries?
Are we finished? We kind of had a 2 March extension, as I recall, so is that our last meeting, or?
Again, that would be up to council if they wanted to extend, but I believe that is the sunset. I'll be honest with you, I think we're at the point right now with the items that we have on here to just continue with these items because we need updates on each of these, even if next month would be our last meeting. Anything anyone else would want to add to what we currently have, items 2 through 6?
Mayor, my only possible recommendation for the committee to consider is that the main purpose of the Municipal Pool Ad Hoc Committee was to advise council of possible alternatives. So do you want an actual agenda item for the March meeting that would specifically address the recommendation for council?
Yes, we should probably, good point, we should probably have an item titled, final recommendations to city council. From the committee.
And that should fall, if we're getting back some of that information on March 4th, we should be able to have that information ready prior to that meeting, which will be very helpful for that, yeah.
Right. And I think, we're hitting those timelines where, unfortunately, it may just be up to the council to make that final decision because there just won't be enough time for another committee meeting. Any other thoughts on additional agenda items? All right, any other direction then needed? Or was that clear enough? As meandering as it was? All right, that will bring us to our final public comment period. Public comment during this period may be on any issue Speakers are limited to 5 minutes. The phone number to call is 702-589-9629.
Good afternoon, committee members. Cherie Brennan, Aquatic Coordinator. I just have a couple of comments. For reference, the pool has been officially, in past literature that I've come across, as the Boulder City Pool and Racquetball Complex, just for food for thought. And then regarding getting the information out to people, we have such a diverse demographic here. So the pool is not just for children. It's not just for teenagers like swim team. It's not just for the senior citizens. And I know that comments I've heard in the past regarding how we educated people, we weren't getting the word to everybody. So everything, the newspaper, social media, because we have those parents who they're all over, their phones continuously, wanting to know what's going on in town for their kids. But then some of our older population, they don't utilize social media. Some don't have computers. They're reading the newspaper. They're looking at those flyers. So I just want to put that out, like, we need to get the word out every way.
Thank you.
And that's all. Thank you.
Did we have any written emails or voicemails submitted? None. Thank you. Hearing no others then, for public comment, we will close the public comment period and we are adjourned. Thank you all.